who is she? What is this? It's brand recognition, it's the visibility, it's making connections. Like, I've been in sales my entire life, but I've never, like, it's different. I don't even like to call this sales because it doesn't feel like that. It feels like something I genuinely want to do. But yeah, there's the logistics of it. There's flyer creation, there's promotion, there's networking events, like all of that. And so I think
from the Sarah Smiles Network, I'm Sarah Smiles, and this is the Consider the Source podcast, a show about women who've built ideas, movements, and careers by questioning the status quo and challenging the norms in the hopes of inspiring other women. On today's episode, we have Lina Kay, who is a breathwork practitioner, and I had the amazing opportunity to go to one of her classes this past weekend, and when I tell you, it was one of the most amazing community events that I have been to since being in Denver. I am being so truthful in saying that. Lina makes the entire experience so natural and enjoyable, and then she also gives out snacks afterwards. And the snacks for this class were the apple cider donuts from Trader Joe's. It is that fall season, even though it is about 90 degrees outside. Anyways, in this episode, Lina and I talk about what breathwork is, what somatic healing is, how spirituality came into play as a quote-unquote high achiever when her identity was largely built around being an intelligent individual and finding great success in these intellectual achievements and deriving identity from an identity that you don't necessarily identify with. In this episode, we'll talk about all of those things and so much more. So without further ado, here is Lina Kay.
I'm Lina Kassim. I go by Lina Kay. But yeah, I have been participating in breathwork for the past couple of years. Breathwork is essentially breathwork is like an umbrella term that really just refers to different breathing patterns that people incorporate into their healing practice. Specifically, the method that I do and I am hosting events around is psychedelic breathwork, or Wim Hof method. I'm sure people have probably heard of Wim Hof, but we call it that just because of the endorphin rush that it actually releases in the way that you're breathing. So that method is like 2 inhales, 1 into the belly, 1 into the chest, and then letting your exhale fall. And so breathwork session would be active breathing in that pattern that, it creates this really amazing release of emotions, release of energy, and it just can really help the subconscious stuff just kind of come to the surface.
Yeah. I went to this retreat called Miraval. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I did a transformative breathwork class there, and I had an out-of-body experience. It was wild, yeah, because the breathing that you do in the class that I partooketh, and it was mimicking hyperventilating. So you're breathing in and out super fast. All of your senses were deprived. And yeah, it was one of the most wild experiences that I've ever had. Yeah. And I cannot express how much it changed my life. Because this really like convoluted long story, but ultimately while I was doing that breath work, I had this really like deep weight on my chest and on my like pelvis, and I was like, that's really weird. And so I told the instructor, and he's like, your chakras are blocked. And I was like, okay, who's chakra and what's she doing here? And then I left that retreat, and I was living in Boston at the time, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go and get my aura read, get my chakras read, and then go to this. It was amazing, highly recommend it. And I went to this random place in Salem, Massachusetts, not related or affiliated to the breathwork class at all. Didn't tell them anything about the breathwork class. And sure enough, my heart chakra and my sacral chakra were blocked. And I was like, what?
I love that. I'm a big fan of energy healing, so I love to hear that.
It's amazing. And so I'm obsessed with breathwork. I actually just saw a psychic last week, and she said I need to work on my breathwork.
Well, I'm having the first event this Sunday, so if you're not doing it.
Yeah, what time?
I'll send you event page after this, but yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so tell me more about how you got into breathwork, because I feel like it's not one of the things that you grow up in school learning about, or that you go to college or like a trade school for.
For sure. First, I'll talk about the first time I ever thought of breathwork or heard of it. It's funny, it was probably at least 7 or 8 years ago, and I remember I was on YouTube and I was just going down rabbit holes, and I was watching this influencer who was talking about her experience doing an ayahuasca retreat. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, what is that? And so I watched this whole thing. And first of all, ayahuasca is insane from what I've seen in videos.
Yeah.
And so it's a very intense story. And then at the end of the story, she gets to this point and she goes, well, during the retreat, one of the most, if not more insightful experiences than ayahuasca was the breathwork sessions I had. And I was like, my ears were peaked. I was like, wait, what? Like you're comparing breathing to drug, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
hallucinogen on earth.
Mhm.
And I was like, what is this? And so I instantly kind of started going down that rabbit hole. And I was like,
Yeah.
wow. And the funny thing is, like, you can't really explain how it feels. Like going into my first session, I had no idea what to expect. I was just very open. I knew it was a healing practice. And, you know, I'm someone who struggled to feel connected to my body for a large part of my life. And so I was really excited for those reasons. My first session was amazing. I feel I experienced bliss, anger, sadness, like you cry, you rate all of it, right? And it was great. And I've had sessions since then that were more challenging or more, you know, eye-opening or deeper. It's just, I feel like every session has its own intention and you can't necessarily predict how it goes, but it's always something I needed at the time. That was how I just kind of found out about breath work. I had been doing, you know, therapeutic work for a while. I'm someone who, you know, from a really young age, I just kind of felt like there was something like, and you know, when you're young and you like have low self-confidence or you don't really know who you are yet, I really prided myself on being the smart one. I got moved around schools, for that. And that was like my whole identity. And so when you base your whole identity in something that has nothing to do with who you actually are, it's a recipe for like low self-confidence. And so for a long time, I struggled with that. I struggled with depression and other anxiety and things that came up, especially as I got older and like went off to college. And for me, I feel like when I became an adult, I finally got on my own. I went to college. That was the first time where like everything kind of just came to a head. And I fell into a really deep depression. Like I struggled with an eating disorder from really young age, around 14, and I never really treated it. So again, you go off on your own. All of a sudden you have to be an adult. You don't have any of the tools to be an adult.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just kind of came to a head. And so at that point I was like, all right, I'm an adult now. I need help. Where do I go for help? I go to therapy. I would love to say that therapy fixed it right away and all of that, but like, you know, anyone who's been through that journey knows that it takes time and trial and error. And I think for me, you know, medication was super helpful in the beginning when I was just at such a low point that I just needed something to help me be okay. But there's no pill that's going to fix your body and being dysregulated. You know what I mean? You're nervous not knowing how to regulate itself. I feel like I just really didn't feel much when I was younger. I just kind of repressed everything. And so you really don't have the practice or capacity to regulate as an adult on your own. And so that was kind of what led me to seeking help. And it was many years after that that I finally found the therapist I work with now, who started introducing like somatic work. And she was like, well, I don't even know if she knew that she was introducing somatic work, but I remember her asking me, we were talking about something deep, and she goes, well, where do you feel it in your body? And I was like,
Oh, wow.
you know, what does that mean? You know, I was like, what do you mean? I'm telling you I'm anxious. What is unsettled?
Yeah.
And she was like, well, what sensations are you feeling in your body? It's funny because like I used to think that I was never going to be someone who could meditate. Like I have ADHD, my thoughts run a million miles a minute sometimes, or they used to. And so I was like, there's no way I could quiet my mind. But she, like, again, working with this person and starting to really do things that put me in my body and force me to like participate with my body, that was like the turning point. I mean, everything changed after that. And I think one of the things that I wish more of us understood was that a lot of Western medicine, and I don't mean just therapy and psychiatry, I mean, even physical medicine is not holistic as far as looking at the root cause of things. I feel like it was a lot of symptom management, and the missing piece for me was my body. You can't get better in a body that doesn't feel safe or that doesn't feel that you don't feel connected to.
Yes. And there has been this new wave in my life that has been revolving around exactly what you're saying of you have zero problems in life when your body is doing well and doing what it's supposed to be doing. But you have infinite problems in your life when your body isn't doing what you want it to do. And I think the ideology that I had carried for so long, and that I think that so many people have carried and still carry, is that your body is just this tool. It's utilitarian. You need to exercise it and you need to stimulate it. But beyond that, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And there's been this new wave of mental health and understanding that maybe we should be talking about our feelings instead of bottling them up. And so I feel like there's been micro progressions, but it's still not at the point of what you're sharing.
Right.
And it's still this holistic portion and this holistic piece that is missing from our realm of daily housekeeping with just ourselves. Like, meditation is something you can do every single day on your own.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's this new wave of holistic health and holistic medicine, and people are really waking up and realizing, like, what am I putting in my body? What am I doing to my body? What are the effects of it? So have you noticed that trend in like trying to fill that gap and bridge that gap for people?
Yeah, I do think there's definitely been and maybe it's just the stuff I pay attention to, but I do think that even the word somatic or somatic therapy, or like, and sometimes it doesn't actually, it's not called that, right? So in therapy, in therapeutic terms, there are things like IFS, which is internal family system. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that, but it's an approach that basically looks at us as people as having multiple different parts to ourselves or parts to our psyche. So kind of like when you're like, oh, part of me wants to go, but the other part of me doesn't.
Right.
That's a very general example of like that modality. And it's the whole concept of like, there are no bad parts, but you can't ignore them. You got to get to know them. You got to interact with them. So that practice is almost meditative. It's like you put your hand on your heart, you go inward, you try to identify and have conversations. And that's a very somatic thing. And it's honestly been one of the most helpful things for me. EMDR is another somatic practice, right? We're incorporating the body, rapid eye movement to desensitize and reprocess things. And so I do think that Western therapy is starting to pick up on that. I still think there's probably going to be a lag between that and like physical. So for example, like I struggled with endometriosis for 16 years and I had no idea. I just knew, like I think I was 14 when my period disappeared, and then just dealing with more and more health issues. And it wasn't until this past year I just had surgery and diagnostic and removal, and it was just like, we are now understanding scientifically even like the connection between autoimmune disorders and inflammation and trauma and your body being, because what is trauma? It's prolonged stress on the body that you cannot handle. The body's overwhelmed. And so when we're doing that, I mean, I honestly believe that like our nervous system and our body is at the root of every ailment that we're dealing with, right? But I do think there's a very powerful mind-body connection that we're just now kind of starting to scratch the surface on.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I feel like as you're talking about somatic work and as you're talking about holistic health and Western medicine, I have been learning more and more, just casually scrolling through my feeds on social media, that trauma is inherited. Like, you can inherit trauma. And so then yes, which is just such a mind-boggling thing. And as I have been going along my own journey, I have come to realize that we are all from the same realm. We are all from the same earth. We are all from the same makings. And so it makes sense that things are passed along and things are internal just as much as they are external. And it has been such an awakening for me in realizing, and there's still so much that I don't know. So obviously you're watching this YouTube video, you're like, I'm really interested in breath work. How old were you when this happened? How much information was there even? Because I feel like right now in 2025, there is starting to be more information, or at least a base level. So depending on when you started learning about it, how much information was there?
Yeah, so it's funny because breathwork was probably the last piece that I found. I found all of the other somatic tools first and like started dipping into nervous system regulation. But I moved out to Denver in 2023, and that's when I first like fell in love with breathwork. And at that time, I mean, even like you said, even now it's not the most talked about or mainstream thing. Luckily, we live in Denver where it's a little bit more common. But yeah, it's definitely still not mainstream. And so I think when I first started looking into it, I had to, again, I saw that YouTube video, and I went on Instagram and I was like, breathwork in Denver, because I knew I was, moving. It was right before that I started looking into it, because even where I live, like part of the reason I looked for it in Denver was because I lived in Northern Virginia, like outside DC, not too far. And no one there is talking about it. You know what I
girl,
mean?
I lived in Boston. I totally get that. Like, people are not, they're like, you're woo-woo. There's something wrong with you.
Exactly. No one's going outside. No one's taking hike. You know what I mean? Like, part of the reason I moved here was for the connection to nature and all of that. And stillness and a slower life. But like, yeah, it's kind of sad because depending on where you live, these might be things that you don't even come across unless you actively go looking for them. And I think a lot of people who do go looking, like I did, don't really go looking until like there's an issue, you know?
Mm-hmm.
When in
Yeah.
reality, that like somatic work and meditation, all of these things are the best preventative.
Mm-hmm. So you're finding all of this information. You're like, okay, I'm moving to Denver. This is going to be great for my psyche. This is going to be great for my mental health. Like, this is going to be very cleansing, very rooting for me. So you move to Denver and you're still looking into breath work. What happens next? Like, you go to your first class, and then from there, you're like, this is it?
No, so I did say this is it as far as like I got to do this a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's funny because, you know, I found a specific breathwork instructor, Candace Wells. She actually does a lot of breathwork events in Denver as well. But when I met her, she took a step back more recently, but when I met her, she was in full swing. And so I remember it's funny because even just like seeing the page, I was like, oh yeah, like this is my vibe. And I went to the first event, and like I said, it's intense. You know, I didn't know what to expect. It does feel like you're high. Like it's going to take you 10 minutes to come down afterwards. But it's also just like, so it's almost like processing or healing physically in rapid fire, right? Like your body's doing its thing. And so I just remember being so in awe of that. And after that, I was like, okay, well, again, this is something I want to incorporate. But I was still, I mean, I work a 9 to 5. I still have my regular corporate job. And I actually really like my job. But if we're talking about like passion and purpose and, you know, I've always lived in the space of like, I just want to help people. I almost became a therapist when I was younger. And so that's just always been how I wanted to do it. I didn't necessarily know how. And so once like, there's a really great quote from Brene Brown that I really love. And I'm going to mess it up now that I'm on the spot, but it's something to the fact of like, one day you'll tell your story of the things of how you overcame the things you did, and it'll be someone else's survival guide. And like, that to me is everything. When we go to places, like when I showed up to Candace's event, like she's holding space because she's, I'm sure, been through things. And so it's almost like this passing down of like, community and like let's help each other. And so the more time that I spent going to the events, the closer I actually got to Candace as well. She's the one who trained me in breath work. So building those relationships, I mean, I even saw like other friendships changing, like the quality of people and the kind of people that were aligned with like my heart and like the things that I'm into. Like my community, I'm so grateful for it now in Denver. And I had great friends back home too, don't get me wrong, but it's just it's a different appreciation when it feels like it's around the thing that you're passionate about or the thing that feels like your purpose. And so, yeah, I got to a point one day where I was just like, hey, like, I want to do this. Like, I want to use these tools I was telling this to my breathwork teacher, and I was like, I want to use these tools. Like, do you train people? And she was like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, I've trained so many facilitators. And so she agreed to, and we got to work. And yeah, it's been great so far. You know, we connected at like my first launch event is this week. So it's that taking off stage, right? Like I've done the work of kind of getting the brand together and the services and all of that. And now I'm so excited to bring it to the community.
Yeah. And that's awesome. And to see everything come to fruition and be able to build that community and show up in your own community, it's really a beautiful thing. And I'm so proud of you. Like, that's awesome. And honestly, so much hard work goes into that goes unseen. So I just want to recognize that is a lot of hard work, and that I totally see that. It is hard. So yes. Congrats to you.
Yes. It's not really I come home and it's the 5 to 9, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but I will
100%.
say, I'm sure you know this too, because my best friend has a podcast and it's her passion project. And so it feels very different when I'm working on breathwork and somatic stuff versus like, again, I like my job, but that is a job. This is a purpose. It feels very different. Yep. Like, you know, I've been doing one-on-one sessions for clients, and I'm just like, at the end of it, I'm like, I'm getting just as much out of this. Like, I'm filling my cup, just holding the space for you, watching your body process through all these things, watching you make these connections, and then we get to reflect about it afterwards and integrate. And it's just like, that to me is like, I'm getting energy back versus feeling drained.
Yeah, definitely. And as you're doing these breathwork sessions, do you do them yourself, or do you do like a mock trial? Like, I know when people do public speaking events, they normally like speak into the mirror and then watch themselves do it. Like, is there a similar version of that for breathwork, or do you kind of just like, well, let's see if this does something?
Yeah, they're kind of, so I play a different role. I definitely don't do the actual breath work with them because I need to
Okay.
be not high
Right.
my breath. So so what I'll do is I will verbally cue and instruct. Like we start with the intro. I'll tell you what breath work is, where it came from, all of that. And then in my one-on-one sessions, I have a few questions that I like to ask the client just to get them started thinking about their body, thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
some of them are like, 1 to 10, how connected do you feel? Or is there something you're looking for energetically or emotionally from this session? Things like that to just kind of get them thinking about their actual body. And then we'll do the actual breathwork portion of it is me verbally cueing. So I'll do the tutorial of like, okay, 2 breaths in, and I'll exaggerate the breath so they can hear what it sounds like. Once I feel like they've gotten the pattern, we'll then actually, I'll put the playlist on. There's always a playlist to go along with it. And one thing that I really love about this method too is that Candace actually, this was something that she coined herself, and it incorporates a primal scream. So like towards the end of the session, you have all of the breath work. There's like 42 minutes of active breathing, and then there's a song where towards the end you get to let out a cathartic or somatic scream. And it's in a, it's, some people don't, it's awkward. It sounds weird, but like some people don't want to, it is optional. But for me personally, that's one of my favorite parts. So like you get to put all of the energy out and it just feels better afterwards.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been amazing to be able to walk people through that. And then afterwards, I like to give them, like, again, in one-on-one sessions, I'll give them about 3 to 5 minutes to journal about it, just get everything down before they forget. And then we'll get together, reflect, and I'll kind of, help them make the connections to whatever came up for them.
Yeah. And that is in and of itself just a lot to take in because you have no like therapeutic training besides for this breathworking class. And so that is a large, just intuition based, this is what I think, like this is how and so it's truly amazing how I have seen women's intuition work in the interviews that I've conducted with people like you of just, this is what I think, this is what it's going to work, and this is how this relates to this. And so really, truly inspiring. And for me, my question is, how do you guide that? How does that come to you?
So I will just say, so I obviously I'm not a clinician. I
Right.
was a behavioral health counselor for an eating disorder treatment center.
Okay.
It was a short stint. I think I was there for about 6 months. It was actually at a time where, again, I was still working my corporate job and I didn't do it for money. I was like, I am going to take on this second role because I'm missing the part that's purpose. I'm missing the part that fills me up. And again, as someone who had struggled in the same way, like nothing would make me happier. And so in that time, like I had some training, but honestly, by the time I had gotten to that position, like I've always been a really sensitive kid. Like I can think of being in grade school and like helping people through traumatic, you know what I mean? Like wanting to talk about it and wanting to get
Yeah.
people to like open up. And I even remember like there were so many times where people would be like, I don't know why, but I feel like I can talk to you about this. And to me, that's like the
Yeah.
greatest honor. That is what I want to be. And so I think it's a mix of that, but then it's also like the best teacher was probably the worst student at some point, So like going through that experience and like being someone who always wanted to hold space for others, but maybe didn't know how to hold space for myself or didn't know how to connect to my own stuff. I think just learning through that experience helped a lot. And then some of it too is just, like you said, it's intuition. You know what I mean? Like it's funny. I've never been asked that. It's hard to kind of like quantify that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always feel like I've been I'll watch for shifts in energy, body language. One of the things I love about my therapist is that even through Zoom sessions, if she says something and my like voice goes monotone or my shoulders like she will see it. And so I always try to emulate that with people too.
Yeah, and it's truly such an impressive trait because it's something that I feel is so important, especially with the evolution of technology and the evolution of AI and feeling like, okay, what do we know versus how do people feel? And like, are we ever going to replace that? And so, not that I think that AI is like a devious system or anything like that. It does have its place, but it still speaks so deeply that humans have so much value and there is so much knowledge and so much just knowing that you can't explain. It's just the knowing. And I don't know if you are familiar with Glennon Doyle or her book, but she talks about this feeling of knowing. And it's just this voice inside your head that feeds you, gives you thoughts, and just deep down, you know, is right. Like when someone makes a bet and they're like, I know this is it. Or if you make a life decision, like you're going to move across the country from Virginia to Denver, Colorado, you're like, I know this is it.
Calling to me for like, it's funny because that was one of the things where like I just knew. And for the year beforehand, I was at a job that wouldn't let me move when I decided I was moving. Like I had no plan, no way to get. I was just like, this is just happening.
Wow.
I love that you talk about inner know, and then you make life fall into place. But it was,
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's. I love that you talk about the inner knowing because, and I think another piece of that too is like when you have something like anxiety or when you have trauma or PTSD or anything like that, we don't know how to trust our bodies, right? Like, because, oh, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's this, we're always gaslighting ourselves out of it, right? And I think I used to like question like, okay, well, what's the difference between intuition and just anxious thoughts? And I think mindfulness has been super helpful. Like I fully believe that we are not our thoughts. We're the observer of our thoughts. And I think one of the things that I've come to understand is that intuition comes as a physical sensation first, like, versus where like anxiety might be a thought and then you feel panic. You know what I mean? So I think again, like the wisdom is in the body. It is within us. It's just about being able to unlock that.
Yeah. And even going back to what you were saying about the scream at the end of the practice, that is, and you say that it might be awkward or uncomfortable, but that's just like your own thinking of how you're going to be perceived. And it's not necessarily like your body's behavior. And
Wow.
so keeping it in you is actually doing you a disservice, I feel like. I mean, I'm no expert, you're the expert, but I feel like you're doing yourself a disservice. I remember I was on the phone with one of my girlfriends. It was her birthday, and I got her voicemail. And I was sitting in my car, and I'm like, am I going to sing happy birthday to her voicemail? Like, that is so awkward. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to, who cares? Like, I'm just going to leave this voicemail. Although it was just a voicemail of me saying happy birthday, it wasn't anything crazy, it wasn't anything life altering, it still felt like I was taking ownership of my own thoughts and my own brain, because there's so many times when that little voice in your head is just like, no, you're an idiot, that's wrong. Yes. And it's just, it is so empowering to know that that is something that you can harness. That is something that you can awaken and call your own with something like breath work. So getting back to breath work and the sensations and the feelings that you have, obviously being compared to ayahuasca is absolutely bonkers to my brain, but it's so true. Being someone that has gone through a breath work workshop, I haven't done ayahuasca, but it is wild. You are oxygenating parts of your body that don't typically receive oxygen. So walk me through what sensations your body is feeling or what you're looking to stimulate within your body.
So obviously the breath is extremely powerful. There are different breathing patterns you can use for different things, like calming down versus release. So when I think about psychedelic breath work, you're right, it does kind of mimic hyperventilation, but not exactly, because the safety piece of it, and breathwork is safe, but like the only thing that some people experience is tetany. So like if you are breathing only into your chest, or you're not allowing the breath to get to the belly first. So it looks like this. It's a deep belly breath, deep. So first in your belly, second in your chest, and then you let the exhale fall. So if you're pushing it out, pushing it hard, that, you're more likely to get tetany. It's all about the power. Kind of how you're doing it. So there's a science to it. But I say that because, a lot of the most common things that I feel, there's always going to be tingling. There's always going to be, some people get that kind of, I don't want to say pins and needles, more tingling. People, like I said, tetany can be a thing. For me, I feel, and I know other people have described, it almost feels like a weight is on you, but not in a bad way. It's not like anxiety where there's like something sitting on your chest, but
right.
And you probably know because you had that sort of like out of body experience feeling, but it's almost like a floating or being, weighed down. And honestly, like obviously afterwards you'll feel a little bit lightheaded, and it's just, but there's also this like glow from the endorphins. Like the best way I can kind of describe like the endorphin piece of it, or like the bliss that a lot of people experience, is like a runner's high. So like I've never had a runner's high. I've had a kickboxer's high. Like I hate running. I hate steady state running. I like cardio. That's cardio, but I love kickboxing. And so the only time I've ever had like an endorphin rush or high is from kickboxing classes, and like that buzz of like like everything's okay and there's just like this release. And yeah, and like I said, every session's different. For some people, I'm not gonna sit I never say that healing is all sunshine and rainbows. It can bring up a lot of emotions, and for people, I would never suggest like an intense breathwork session as your first exposure to your feelings.
Right.
Like, like, yes, I love breathwork. I will swear by breathwork, but it can be too much for some people just based on where they're at. But like I said, as long as you are like, you have some sort of container, some sort of support, and like you're really looking to get in touch with your body, like breathwork can really take you to that next level.
Yeah. And I definitely agree. Going straight from 0 to 10,000 is a lot, and definitely. Exactly. So it's definitely an incremental thing, but how would you recommend, okay, let me see if breathwork is for me. What is the first class I should take? What if I want to do this, this, and this? And what would you recommend to somebody that is new and looking to get involved and make it part of their routine?
Right. Well, the first thing that I would ask or want to know about that person is their connection to their body. Like how often, how well do you feel your inner sensations? How well do you feel hunger? How well do you feel your heart rate, your pulse? Like what is your connection to your sensations? Because I think that's very telling. And then I would want to ask like, what, not necessarily, don't tell me your traumas, right? But if you have experienced any sort of significant, emotional issues, have you ever addressed that? Have you ever had any sort of interaction with that? And it can be talk therapy. Again, it can be someone who, maybe has started to meditate. My biggest thing is just, I would like them to have some sort of introduction to somatic techniques and connecting to their body, because I don't want the first time you feel in your body, because I remember the first time I dropped into my body during meditation. It's intense. It's intense if you're not used to it. It's uncomfortable, and you haven't yet built that relationship or that trust with yourself, which is where like I also, it's, I do breathwork events, but I also do like somatic coaching. And so either working with like a therapist, although I know that's not accessible for everyone, but they're, working with a coach, or even, there's a lot of available like tools even online, right? Even small things. And I try to share like on my social media page, just a few techniques and breathing patterns that people can try out to just kind of get themselves acquainted, or like dip your toe in the water. But yeah, I will say, I didn't like do a half breathwork session before I did a full one, but I had years of trauma therapy and really making that connection to myself.
Yeah. So it's moreover just about deeply understanding what you're looking to get out of it, who you are, which is a really, really deep question that I feel like seems super easy to answer and seems like you are with yourself every day. Like, shouldn't you know what these answers are? But in reality is that if you show up to a breathwork class that's really intensive, it's likely to feel overwhelming. It is likely to feel like you're drinking out of a fire hose, and like you're not going to be able to do it. So that can't be a good experience.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it seem like you have to be healed to do breathwork, because that's
right.
I actually think it's very helpful for people who are in vulnerable positions. So again, like I think the basis of it is just understanding how well do you feel your body, and what do you have that you think might be a block. And it might not necessarily mean like don't do breathwork. It might just be maybe not right now. But I have also seen like a lot of people who have come in who have struggled in emotional places. Breathwork is really, it's really helpful for them. But again, it wasn't their very first intro to it. I think it takes, and honestly, I don't really believe in healed, right? With like a D. I think you're always healing, you are always growing, you are always changing. And so I think as long as you have some sort of introduction to yourself, and also the intention and the desire to deepen that connection to yourself, like I think what happens, or where things go wrong, is when you come into a breathwork session having no experience, and also being afraid of your own, like of your own self, of your own emotions. Our mindset and our have a lot to do with it. So if I'm coming into something and I'm already thinking that it's not going to work, or it's going to be too hard, or X, Y, and Z, like I really do think that even the way that we look at things has a lot to do with that. And so I think being open is probably just being open and being comfortable with getting to know your body, and having that introduction, I think is really all that's necessary.
Yeah. And I feel like that is utterly the most important part of just trying to figure out what makes you tick, what you're trying to gain out of what you're going to search for. And are you running to something, or are you running from something? Because ultimately, if you show up at a breathwork breathwork class and you're like, I don't see how this is going to help me. I don't see how it's not gonna.
Right.
And that's not to say that breathwork doesn't work, because if you did the same thing in therapy, that wouldn't work. If you did the same thing at the gym, that wouldn't work. So it's ultimately not a testament of how much breathwork works or how much therapy works or how much going to the gym works. It's ultimately, what is your level of commitment and where are you? Because it's not like if you show up to the gym, you're going to be able to lift 500 pounds on your first time to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
So
and if you're telling
yourself like,
because you can't lift 500 pounds, then that's not the right mindset to come in with.
Exactly. And I feel like that's what's so important. I feel like with people's journey on healing their bodies and feeling whole and not having these parts of themselves that they want to repress or ignore, it really is a difficult place to figure out where to start. And I feel like that is an issue that I have faced, because people have asked me and told me multiple times that my podcast should be about spirituality. I'm like, girl, I don't know enough about spirituality to be talking about it every day. But that's part of the issue is, where do you put yourself? And is it just in the middle, or do you work backwards? And I feel like what you're saying is so important, of trying to figure out where you're at, where you want to be, what questions do you want to ask? Because it's not like you knew everything about breathwork when you found the video of what is breathwork, how does it work?
Right. Yeah, honestly, for me too, it's like I'm a people person. So yes, so doing research and like Googling and going down that rabbit hole, I think is also a part of, like, I feel better when I can understand something. So I will do all the research on it. And once I kind of get that spark, I think the next step is always like some sort of like guidance, right? So like I said, having a therapist or a coach, or sometimes for some people it's a mentor, you know what I mean? But I think one thing that we, especially as a Western society, have forgotten is that, like, we're social beings. We are meant to be in community with others. There are certain things that I believe we heal in relationship to others. And so having that and having some sort of sounding board or guide in that process can be really helpful, especially when you're trying to do like deep inner work. So I think that finding someone that you trust, again, whether that's a therapist, a coach, or a mentor that like has the tools to be able to kind of help you get started, and then seeing how you feel about things. I think it's also really important to like pace yourself. Like, you know, I feel like I didn't make the significant, like, looking at my life now versus 6 years ago, it's like a timeline shift, you know, like it's things. I'm so grateful for what I have right now. But I remember being in a place where I'm like, I can't, how do I get there? You know what I mean? And so is a lot of the incremental stuff. And I think a lot of times we're really hard on ourselves because we think we have to get better or figure it out overnight. And that's just realistically, especially like if you're finding, you know, that you want to get to know yourself and you want to do this work at even, let's say even 20, which is pretty young. Most people don't go to therapy by 20, you know what I mean?
Right.
So if you're finding this at that age, it's like you have 20 years of not doing that. You know what I mean? Like you have 20 years of all of these maladaptive skills that we've put together to just survive. Don't expect it to happen overnight, and I think self-compassion has been the most important thing in this work. Is just understanding, like, I think, you know, I think accountability is really important, but when we use accountability to shame ourselves, especially for things like just not knowing how to regulate, those are tools that we weren't given. Just like you said, weren't taught this in school. Like, there's just now schools that are starting to have like meditation time for kids, but oh my gosh, had we had that back in the day, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I feel like exactly what you're saying of, how do you know where to begin unless you just do it? How do you know where to begin if you keep comparing yourself to perfection? So with that same mindset, you're going in and you're learning about breathwork. You're going through coaching of how to do this on your own. But how did you decide, instead of working under somebody, that I'm going to start my own business? This is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to do it. How did all of that come to fruition?
Yeah, honestly, you know, it's funny because I literally just said I love my job, and I do. Like, this is probably the best company I've been at in a very long time. But again, like, it's not healing work. It's not the stuff I'm about. And so, my older brother is an entrepreneur. He's been an entrepreneur since he was like 24. So his entire career is like starting and selling businesses. And it's funny because I used to think that I would never do that. Like, again, when I was super anxious and everything seemed hard, I'm like, oh, I could never do that. I could never, have to figure it out on my own. So I think even me coming to this place of like, I'm ready to do it and do it well, it's a huge shift in progress. But also I think I just realized that like, there's so much freedom, like freedom of time, freedom of like being able to help, like even if I wanted to like offer sliding scale or be more accessible, or if I wanted to change brand or change direction, like all of these different things that you don't have to filter through someone else when you work for yourself. You know what I mean? I think obviously, and hopefully this will be an issue someday, but like once a company scales or a brand or a person scales to a certain degree, yeah, you might need support and you might need help, but like at the end of the day, it's still me building something for my community and for myself. I'm not just like doing these tasks for a product that I'm selling for a company that like, you know what I mean? And like capitalism is a whole, but like it just feels a lot more aligned and it feels a lot more soul led. And like, that's what I want. And I can't guarantee that I'm going to get that working under someone else.
Right. Yeah. And 100%. And I feel like we are seeing that happen for so many people with the number of people that just are trying to become influencers right now. Of the number of people that want to be self-employed, the number of people that want to have a creative outlet. And I've said this on a podcast before, and I'll say it again. I truly believe that there's going to be a rebirth and renaissance of people looking to do creative outlets, people looking to have a life's purpose, as opposed to just working a 9 to 5, because that is what is safe.
Yeah, 1,000%. 1,000%. I totally agree with that. I mean, I might be happy at, in my job now, but I've had 9 to 5s that drained me, that like I did it every day. I didn't want to go to work. You know what I mean? And it's not because I'm lazy. I've always had a really good work ethic, but it just, when you feel disconnected from the mission, or you feel disconnected from like what is the why? Like, why am I doing this actually? Who is it affecting? And is it affecting them positively? Like when it's really hard to have purpose when you are a cog in the machine. And I think like you're right. You're talking about a huge shift that I do see happening. And I'm really grateful that we live in a time where like people can start businesses and can start brands and do all of these things from their phone. Like that's insane to me. It's awesome. But yeah, I definitely think that like a lot more. And we, you touched on spirituality. I'm not a religious person, but I'm a very spiritual person. And like, it's fun. This is called Consider the Source, because I believe we all come from source, right? Like believe we come from the same person. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where like, if you don't feel connected to that, if you're an artist who needs to, like, I think we all have to create. It's in different avenues. And so,
yes.
Yeah, I definitely think we're going to see more of that because people want to be freer.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love what you're doing and how you're creating it into your own creative outlet that makes you also live your life's purpose. And what do you see continuing, and how do you find growth as this business and as you continue to grow? Like what is your vision? What is your manifestation of how this is going to look to pan out?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about this a lot. I've meditated on this a lot. So, obviously I'm launching the first event this weekend. I would love to be able to do like bi-weekly events that are based in either a breathwork event or a somatic workshop, right? Teaching people in group settings. I really want the community piece of it to be there. But then the other piece of this is like I love working with people one-on-one. I love working with clients directly. I loved being a behavioral health counselor. So another piece of that, of course, is like actually being able to build out these somatic practices for people and coach them through that. And long term, if we're talking wildest dreams, I would love to be able to host retreats, right? Like I'm someone who has always wanted to live abroad, right? So if I could like host Costa Rica in a couple of years, like that would be dream come true. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's really just about, and also another piece that I've thought about a lot is like the community part of it that's not necessarily physically here. Like I would love to have like an online forum or portal that like people could just find connection and be able to like have all of the tools and trainings in one spot and be able to connect with other people who are on the same journey. So yeah, there's a lot of different pieces. Obviously, we're just focusing on breathwork and somatics right now, but yeah.
Yeah, obviously this huge undertaking on top of the 9 to 5 job which is a lot already. So what are the obstacles that you face when you're looking to start a business in breathwork?
Yeah, I think the obstacles are different because I'm in Denver. I think, again, had I tried to launch this somewhere else, it would probably be a lot harder. But even that said, even knowing that there is an audience for it here, it's who is she? What is this? It's brand recognition, it's the visibility, it's making connections. Like, I've been in sales my entire life, but I've never, it's different. I don't even like to call this sales because it doesn't feel like that. It feels like something I genuinely want to do. But yeah, there's the logistics of it. There's flyer creation, there's promotion, there's networking events, like all of that. And so I think, it's been okay so far, but yeah, I do work a full-time job, and I just got promoted at that job maybe 2 months ago. And so that is very high. It's a high stress job.
Yeah.
So again, had you known me 6 years ago, this was not, I could barely manage one thing at a time. You know what I mean? This was something I ever thought I would be doing, and also not freaking out doing. But all of that is because of the somatic work. It's because of all of the things I've had to actually implement and put into my life. And I'm not going to try to sell someone on meditation and somatic tools and then never actually practice them myself. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be able to do this if I didn't.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like equally, just as much as there are obstacles, there are things that make this so rewarding. And obviously, looking back on 6 years ago, you versus now you is one of the most rewarding things. But what other aspects of going on this journey and building this business, and they probably are two different answers, they might be the same answer, but what has been the most rewarding parts of it?
Yeah, so there's two, both of them are around the connections I've made. So there's love and bliss and spark around actually holding space for someone in session. But then there's the people you meet along the way. There's the connection you make as you're trying to get this off the ground. And so, for example, I recently, the event space that I'm having this breathwork event at, I met a woman who stewards there, and she was giving me the tour, and it was an instant your soul is beautiful, your energy, just her presence. Yeah. We're just vibing right off the bat. And I love when you're able to make deep connections like that and meet, and it turns out also someone who's in this space, she was telling me about quantum touch, which is something I've never heard. You know what I mean? Yeah. I've always been very into quantum physics, but her unique spin on it and her approach and how she uses it. And it's just it's almost like this creative juices are flowing and there's this energy exchange, and it's just and that's not the only experience I've had during this, right? I've met people at vendors at farmers markets who are single women doing the same thing, and even, signing up for different networking programs. You make a connection with someone who's oh yeah, I'm in that space, and this is, and I always how did you do it? So it's really that people aspect of it. I'm very people focused and very people motivated. And so it's been really nice to be able to make those connections. Yeah, I would say that is another really rewarding piece of it too.
Yeah. And I feel we are so fortunate to, it depends on how you look at it, fortunate, unfortunate, how you choose to view social media, but there is such a rewarding aspect of creating a community. You and I would have not been connected if it wasn't for social media. And it really just truly is a powerful force in building community, and just shows us how deeply we yearn for community, whether that's in a virtual aspect or a reality aspect.
Yep, exactly.
I also feel with cultivating community is one of the pillars that provides you a lifeline. If you look at the blue zones that exist and what causes people to become centurions is life's purpose and community, amongst other things, but those are two of the major ones. And so if you're advocating for both of those things, you're going to have a long and beautiful life because you are doing what you feel is right and what is serving to others.
Thank you. That is so sweet. I appreciate that. Honestly, it's incredible because I'm someone who feels things a lot, right? So I feel sadness really intensely. I feel joy really intensely. And that's evened out over time with all the somatic tools, but I'm still a sensitive person. I feel things, and I love that I feel things. And I love that we as humans get to feel the full spectrum of human emotion. And so when I this unique feeling of again, whether it was when I was a behavioral health counselor or being in session with someone and feeling that, and I was oh, this is what people talk about in the movies. This is what the whole hippy dippy, I found my purpose and got it. We hear that a lot. but we don't
Yeah.
actually know what that's going to feel like until it hits you. And it hit me like I remember the first session I ever facilitated was a one-on-one for my instructor, and I'm crying.
Hmm.
Like she's fully in her
Yeah.
session. I'm over here silent tears. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, and it was just like this overwhelming, like, oh my God, I found it. Like this is so beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. So I can completely understand how that impacts like lifespan and quality of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's such an amazing feeling. And I'm so happy for you that you found this passion avenue in life that gives you so much purpose, because you really and truly go to bed every night and wake up excited for the next day of, how am I going to contribute? How am I going to grow this? How am I going to make this much better? And is that something that you experience a lot? Because I know that at the beginning of this conversation, you had said that you were anxious about a lot of different things, and your college experience was a little bit disrupted based on what your emotions were. But it seems like things have flipped.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, like it's sometimes I'm like, was that me? Was that another life? And I don't want to sit here and be like everything is perfect. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
healing is when everything is perfect. I think healing is when you have like the confidence and like the resilience in your spirit to know that even when it's not okay, we'll figure it out. And I
Yeah.
think where a lot of us like fall into depression and these other things is when we have hopelessness or we don't think it's actually going
Mm-hmm.
to get better. We see a way for it to get better. And so, yeah, I mean, my level of like emotional regulation, like life is not a crisis. I feel gratitude more than I feel anything else. Even I can even look back on some of the hardest things I've been through and understand this is why I went through it and I wouldn't be who I
Mm-hmm.
am without it. And so, yeah, I feel super grateful for that. And like, I'm still human, even launching like your first
Yeah.
event, there's going to be a little bit of like, oh, what if it doesn't do well? But then like, I'll catch the thought and be like, you know what? It's not about me. Like,
Yeah.
yes, it's my business, but like, it's really not about me. Like, if I'm really truly doing this because it's mission led, then like, if four people show up and that's okay. Like, that's four people I
Yeah.
got to help that day. You know what I mean? So I think
Mm-hmm.
and that's very different from how you perform at a job when you're being graded and this and that. Like this is just it's a very different feeling. So yeah, I do have that feeling of like I'm so excited I get to wake up and I get to work on this and like
Yeah, which, like you said earlier, anxiety and inspiration slash butterfly feeling, they feel like the same thing. And
they
so
did.
it really has just been your mindset flip of, okay, this is how I'm going to choose to look at this. This is the mindset that I'm going to adopt, and this is how I'm going to choose to view this situation and view my life. And it is such a beautiful thing. And I have to ask and I have to know, have people asked you, like, or said to you, like, you look so different, or there's something really different about you?
Glowing is the word that all of my friends who have known me my whole life use, and
Mm-hmm.
it fills my it makes me happy every time they say that because those are the same friends and people who saw me through the hardest times. And so like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it's been like I said, another friend of mine, she has a podcast and I remember being on that and her even speaking of like God, like, who you are and where you are. And like, I'm just so grateful. And I just had my 30th birthday maybe 3 weeks ago. And I was surrounded by like a bunch of friends. And my friend actually made everyone like, we were doing toasts and made everyone go around and kind of like talk about how we met and things like that. And it just turned into like, I remember sitting there and just thinking, there were so many friends who had talked about me helping them through things. And like, even at times where I couldn't help myself, and I think
Yeah.
it's always we don't really understand the way that other people view us unless we hear it from them. And so it was almost like this out of body, like, oh, wow, like it's this feeling of gratitude. I feel really loved and I feel really seen. And it's also just like I am at a place and a point in my life where I'm who I always thought I feel like I've always supposed to. And, for a lot of people, when they go through something difficult, like a divorce or something like that later in life, they go, well, I finally feel like myself again. And for me, like all of the things I struggled with started from a very young age. So there wasn't really a myself to go back to. And so
Yeah.
doing this work and coming to this place, it's really felt like shedding all of the things that weren't me. Like it's really
Yeah.
not changing into a new person. It's just like these were all the things we got from just, DIYing and trying to get through and survive. And then like
Yeah.
the person underneath is like, it's me. And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm really grateful.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And honestly, such a beautiful story to hear. And Lina, I'm so happy that you came on and that you're able to share your journey about breathwork and share about your business that you're promoting. So, where can people find you on social media or online or in person?
Yeah, so on social media, so on Instagram and on TikTok, it's at enlightened.and.unhinged. So it's a little play on like, yes, we're healing, but healing is messy and like we're still going to be who we really are. And so I like bringing that together. But yeah, that's my handle on TikTok and Instagram. Instagram, there is my link in bio that has, you can buy tickets, you can book, private services and offerings and things like that. And then on TikTok, I'll usually like attach a link to whatever post for the event that I'm promoting and things like that. But I think the best place would probably be Instagram.
Yeah, such a blessing to have you on, and it's so great to hear from you, and I'm so glad that you reached out and connected. It's really, really inspiring and makes me feel whole watching people that are so passionate about what they are passionate about talk about it and share their story and get other people excited about it.
Thank you, Sarah. I really, really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm so glad that we got to connect.
See you night.
Thank you, you too.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Consider the Source podcast. If you're not already, please be sure to follow us on Substack, on YouTube. Yes, we post these videos on YouTube, so go and check those out if you're not watching there already. And then additionally, we are also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere at the Sarah Smiles Network. So make sure to go check us out everywhere you are currently online and spending your time and your screen time. Make sure you're also following us on there. And while you're at it, please subscribe to wherever you are actually listening and give us a 5-star review. Thanks again for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed learning about Lina Kay. All right, everybody, we will see you next week. Bye.